It's the 23rd day, believe it or not, of July in 2023. There's still a few birds left on the planet. Japan is well on their way of an extinction level event. This is the catalyst. It was the straw that broke the planet's back. It was Fukushima. It was a massive pulse event. I'm Dana. How are you? You can call in or text 709-589-4406. Oops. 12 years later, and we're still waiting for the planet to grow as set, to come to life, and make Earth's last stand. Consider subscribing, like, and click the button. Make sure they can trace the database you. What the hell, you know? Barbenheimer. This, and the other one is about geothermal, but I thought to myself when I seen Barbenheimer, this was a 20-year-old nuclear student who won Miss America. And she now equates herself with the famous Barbie movie. And come on, she's nowhere near that. And she also, because she's a student, and a first-year student, she equates herself with Oppenheimer. It's really something how the nuclear industry... And you see this with everybody in the nuclear industry, where they feel entitled. The minute they attach nuclear to the moniker, they feel like they're entitled. These are actually terrible people, though, unfortunately. The total amount of tritium they said they're going to release from Fukushima is 2.2 grams. From the nuclear meltdown. This is the new story, the new version of Fukushima that showed up a few weeks ago. From the big pushers was Australia, but I'm sorry, first South Korea, Japan, China, Taiwan. And hence the reason we got a poll, kind of, there it is. Should the world hate Japan, Taiwan, South Korea, and China over Fukushima's deadly tritium mass hoax, Hoodwink? They're hoodwinking. You got these four entities are working together to manipulate all of the Asian communities, but also the rest of the world. They're working together through, I guess, United Nations is the organizer of this nonsense, because they're being put on a pedestal as the holy grail of yes and no's. They're doing it for a paycheck. They're this evil for a paycheck. And they revel in deceiving the entire planet for some reason. Japan's nuclear wastewater discharge plan provokes worldwide protests. Worldwide protests. This is what they want, and they want you to protest 2.2 grams of tritium. And to back it up, they got the world's media is pretending they're in a building that don't exist. They're pretending they're looking down on the fuel pools far above the wreckage itself. And there's 70 nuclear power plants in the United States exactly like this, the same ones. There was no building left. The whole story is insane. They've done the same thing with Reactor 3. The plumes of uranium, plutonium, and americium. And we have the actual fallout studies of these different isotopes. But just all of a sudden, 3 weeks ago, they changed the narrative to 2.2 grams of tritium is all that got out, that these are not real. So to give you context, this is how big the first piece of this structure actually is. This structure actually is. The bottom piece you're looking at, the very bottom piece in the bottom of the screen, is the top of this one. And that one is taller than the stump of Reactor 3 and the stump of Reactor 4 on top of each other. So it's very confusing.
My understanding is on top of what used to be reactor.
So when you see these people pretending they're on a building that don't exist, the news story is 2.2 grams. And there's around 10 million pounds in each building. It's evil on a whole different level. I don't have anything else to compare it to. The radiation fallout is catastrophic to everything with replicating cells, and the planet is literally sound asleep. And so Japan, Taiwan, South Korea, and China are working together to perpetrate the deceit. Japan's nuclear wastewater discharge provokes worldwide protests, but it actually don't. The protest they're trying to create is for tritium. They're pretending nothing's ever got out, and 2.2 grams is in 1,000 tanks, and you should be outraged they're going to dump it in the ocean. But there was currently 105,000 on-site storage locations throughout the whole prefecture. Like the 14 prefectures were banned by 55 countries. There was 105,000 sites like this with 1-ton bags. Because around 10 million pounds per reactor got out, not 2.2 grams. Maniacs. When it comes to International Atomic Energy Agency, there's a story from this year where they're going to reuse some of those millions of 1-ton bags around, they admit to 30 million. They're using it to grow food in a nuclear wasteland that they like to call a no-go zone, because it sounds better than a nuclear wasteland, I suppose. And they said the International Atomic Energy Agency, UN's little military-industrial complex, which is UN's little puppet, is not a regulator and therefore not in a position to judge or approve Japan's soil recycling project. Well, they've been doing this from day one, where they're growing food right alongside of 1-ton bags of radiation. And now they get the bags cut open and dumped in the same fields, and they're growing food in that. It's like they said, we just don't care. We'll poison everybody because we're poisoned. It's a very special night today. The International Atomic Energy Agency, which is not a regulator, don't have the authority. Beforehand, they handed Kishida, which is the Prime Minister of Japland, a thick blue folder containing the final report saying that there was 2.2 grams of tritium, and that's acceptable. If you only release it in increments at 0.06 grams a year. And over 30 years, you release 2.2 grams. In reality, though, they contaminated the entire planet. This is just the 30 million 1-ton bags they picked up to trick people into going back into the nuclear wasteland. The no-go zone. Because, it's a nuclear wasteland. And the current president of South Korea in 2021 was in a big controversy by saying he was a former prosecutor, has claimed there was basically no radiation leak from Japan. Leak. And every time I heard the word leak, the near future is we're going to have a 1 week a year where everybody's allowed to go out and paint pro-nuclear nuclear scientists yellow, and there'll be like little signs everywhere so you can spot them. They'll have to wear pink rabbit suits or something. So the former prosecutor, which is now the president of South Korea, said there's no radiation leak from Fukushima, and the reactors didn't collapse. Despite the reactors collapsed, there's no leak because it's all gone, and it's all gone worldwide. This model is 19.5 days. Most of the models agree with that. We have the studies of these catastrophic numbers. Just to remind you, the official story is now only 2.2 grams got out, but they're in 1,000 tanks, and they're going to release 0.062 grams each year until 2.2 grams is all done of tritium, which is the last isotope you're worried about, but you still should be worried about. You can't filter this stuff. So, like, you get a little insight when you see a headline like this of the nuclear industry. Retired Russian colonel proposes blowing up the North Pole to send a message to the West. So there's this disconnect, right? Because you actually have bombs that can do it. Whether it's thermonuclear hydrogen or what, where they add, tritium. Oh, God, it never stops with these people. TEPCO to brief foreign journalists. TEPCO. We actually got, sadly, we got examples of that. It was my pet peeve for many, many years, this clip I'm going to show you. I have post-traumatic stress disorder every time I see it. He's at the press club in the United States where he's got the big media sat there, and they all know how to laugh on cue, which is really interesting. Oh, bear with me. It even shocks me sometimes how much documentation I actually got. If I don't want the clip, it's always in my face. If I want the clip, then it's, oh, that reminds me, hang on. Oh my God, I can't find it. Could such a thing be possible? I'm not sure if that's a good thing or a bad thing. It's just something. I'm going to give you this one while I'm looking for the other one.
But I charge my iPhone every single night. I charge my iPad every single night. I touch that cord, I move that cord, I don't feel a tingle, I don't feel a shock. And if I licked that cord, it wouldn't hurt me.
So she says you get more radiation from licking the cord of your iPhone charger than you would from the meltdown at the Waste Isolation Pilot Project in Mexico. But this work of art, so he's going to show you the transformation of Reactor 4. So he's going to show you all of this, and then the final result, because it's hard to comprehend the picture. So this is what's left of Reactor 4. There's nothing there. And what you're looking at was built to cover that. It doesn't physically touch that wreckage over there. The fuel pools are at the top of the building. So they level this out, remote-controlled cranes, and the homeless, and the destitute, and the victims of society, and the immigrants that don't speak the language, the most vulnerable of society. And then they built this contraption. You can see the whole process up there, off-site, rather than assemble it. It doesn't physically touch the stump of Reactor 4 either. And then this is what the media does with what he's going to tell them. Let me show you the first part.
And
So he's not trying to convince him. There you go, Dana. Nice. Convince him. He's there to be the fall guy. So they're going to say, well, this is our source. He's from TEPCO.
And Fukushima Daiichi stage, right after the accident, it was of course the emergency condition. But right now, gradually became the decommission.
Doesn't he sound like Yoshida Mashada?
And
Try it again.
Fukushima Daiichi stage, right after the accident, it was of course the emergency condition. But right now, gradually became the decommissioning stage, more stable decommissioning stage. And that's that, as I mentioned, the successful completion of the dismantle of the spent fuel from the Unit 4. It's about 1533 bundle from the Unit 4. And we carefully manipulate the machine and successfully removed those fuel to the ground located pool.
So just before that, the media showed up and pretended they were in the building to the left.
Where I'm standing is on top of what used to be reactor building number 4. The whole of this building was blown apart by a huge explosion.
We are here inside Reactor 4 at the Fukushima Daiichi nuclear.
Okay, so he's from TEPCO. He went to America to the Washington Press Club and told them it looks like the building to the right, which they had already done, instead of what it actually looks like to your left. And then that was the end of rationale. So this is the same TEPCO going to brief journalists, foreign journalists, on Fukushima discharge plan. We've heard this many times. TEPCO, which is, it's like someone robs your shop and then the journalists are only allowed to use his version of what happened. He was out walking his dog and the police jumped him and said he robbed the shop, right? And that's his version. And the store owners who were robbed, who have it on camera, and there's all kinds of witnesses. He never had no mask on. Everybody took a picture of him. Are not allowed to use their evidence. Only the criminal is allowed to use the evidence, and there is no evidence. You just make a statement, and then everybody, oh, well, we thought you robbed the place. Sorry about that. Tokyo Electric Power Company, the operator of the destroyed, not crippled, and we see the word crippled constantly, Fukushima nuclear power plant will open the plant's water discharge facility, and I showed you pictures of Reactor 4 facility, which they weren't even in Japan, because they have 70 exact plants like that in America, to foreign journalists and hold a briefing on the plan on Friday. TEPCO, the corporation, where nobody can go to jail because they're in the stock market, so there's no incentive not to be evil, will reportedly invite 15 journalists from various countries, including South Korea, to show them facilities that mix the ALPS treated radioactive water and seawater and discharge it into the sea. On Wednesday, the Japanese government TEPCO held an online briefing on the release for employees of foreign embassies for 46 countries. For 46 countries, embassies had to listen to TEPCO. We're told by TEPCO gave their marching orders, the same as the press club were given their marching orders by a corporation known as TEPCO. which was nationalized because it went bankrupt right away. In the briefing, Japan report, now it's not TEPCO, it's Japan, reportedly explained in detail the content of the International Atomic Energy Agency's comprehensive report, which, by the way, I showed you earlier, they're not a regulator. They don't have the authority to say yes or no. Concluding the discharge meets international safety standards, and said that the nuclear watchdog, which is not a watchdog, it doesn't have any authority, any sovereignty over any country, decided to set up a local office to monitor the water event, but they're not a regulator. And they also report, Japan, not TEPCO, also reportedly promised to transparently and respectfully provide information about the ongoing situation at the Fukushima plant to the 15 journalists and 46 embassies. Oh man, oh man, oh man, oh man, oh man, oh man. Oh man, oh man, oh man, oh man. Okay, so just before we move past that, whatever that, talk about the water for a second, the so-called filtration system. So originally it was the Riva system, 2014 in August, 3.5 years later, was unused, kept out of operation. In 2014, 3 years later, 1 month, 3 years and 1 month, 37 months later, the Vance liquid processing system, ALPS, had yet to function. And in 2013, this is 2014, they had 1,000 tanks, so they had no filtration system. The series system was kept out of operation. The groundwater bypass operation didn't work, the fence didn't work, the ice wall didn't work, and the live streaming fish in the water didn't work because the buildings actually don't even exist. That's the stump of reactor 3, and this is what it should look like, and the fuel pools reactor core is at the top. You can see it's almost down 10, 12 feet above the ground. And they're pretending they got people going into a nuclear meltdown. One of my favorite pictures of all time, actually. Why haven't they showed us a picture with 1,000 tanks after 13 years? And if that infrastructure doesn't touch the building, how can you have a fuel pool at the top of it? And how can you build it and then say you have the fuel pool when it no longer existed? It was built by panels, built off-site, and they were assembled by gravity with cranes. You can see how low the actual building is, almost gutted all the way to the ground. So this infrastructure has nothing there. But then, this is basically what it looks like, and then they claim it looks like this. And so now that nobody's challenged him or held him accountable, including the media that actually said they're in the building, universities and professors says it's the most dangerous thing on the planet. The rods touch each other. Bye-bye Japan. You should evacuate the coastline of North America. And the horror is 2.2 grams got out instead of what you just seen was the entire inventory. Denying critical media access to Fukushima plant only fuels mistrust. So this is about the tritium. So they got, they're very, very, very secretive. They won't let us into the plant. But we've got tons of documentation showing that's not true. They're not at the plant, by the way, either. They're shot dead in the United States where there's 70 similar, well, not similar, but exact same replicas. By Kim Soo-young, Tokyo Correspondent. Japan planned release Japan's planned Well, this has been going on forever and ever and ever and ever. Since Fukushima melted down, there's been a steady hemorrhaging. It's equal to just millions of these bombs going off. Consider sharing me on other sites. You don't have to use my name. Just get the information out there. In fact, it's best if you don't use my name. The industry got no one to beat up, only me, and they got me tortured. We can't even function, really, because we've been ostracized from the planet for so long. They created the Spider-Man and the Hulk specifically to manipulate you in increments your whole life and your children and your friends and your families. All of these superheroes have nuclear in common, and you can't compete with any of them. Wolf Boy here is immune to nuclear fuel rods, for instance, nuclear meltdowns. They got so many superheroes that you can never be, and your grandparents or aunts and uncles can never be the children's heroes ever again. Just get rid of the word hero. They got GoPro heroes and guitar heroes. You can never compete with them in your children's propagandized world, right? We used to deal with our problems. We need to deal with nuclear. Nuclear needs to be dealt with severely. The world needs to lash out at this industry. I'm not saying go Jason on them from Hollywood, but I'm just saying you better get it together because you are running out of time. So here are the journalists talking about the planned release instead of talking about the 12 years of hemorrhaging that has come out of Japan. I'm heartbroken. That the world's sleeping, and the only opportunity they'll ever have to fight back. This model over there is 27 days after the last detonation was complete, which is on the 16th. It covers the whole planet in radioactive fallout in 27 days in that model. He said the International Atomic Energy Agency, which is not a regulatory agency, by the way, declared the plans to be consistent with relevant international standards. So she's pushing the tritium narrative to 2.2 grams of tritium instead of pushing, saying, hey, wait a second, they haven't stopped releasing it. These buildings are destroyed. And it's highly unlikely, and because they never show you pictures in these stories anymore, they're not going to show you that and say 2.2 grams got out, because you're going to roll your eyes, right? To occur next month, debates surrounding the water's safety remains heated, because they created this controversy over tritium and refused to acknowledge the buildings are already destroyed, have been releasing nonstop for 12 years. And so you got all the media worldwide and all the universities and all key government, anybody of any position like of authority that speaks about this topic is promoting tritium. So you'll get the whole planet in denial. And we don't have not a single other person on the entire planet promoting the documentation. Not a single other spot on the entire planet. This is it. And they got me tortured. And I'm forced to get out, do research expeditions at the same time to see how bad this actually is. and it's an extinction event. And so I have perpetual post-traumatic stress disorder because I'm at this all day, every day, all night, every night. And yet I have to function, and I'm not allowed to make a Freudian slip either when I'm talking, or that's chopped out and used to bludgeon me with. Likely to occur next month. Likely to occur next month. The releases that have been going on for 12 years is likely to start occurring next month. See how schizophrenic the whole conversation actually is? It's truly like living in a twilight zone. Every show, it's like, oh, welcome to the batshit. Twilight zone. That's the only thing that makes sense, don't it? When you're looking at that and they're saying it doesn't exist, the only thing I can relate to is Twilight Zone, which is a fantasy movie, unfortunately, but it invokes this surrealness, which is appropriate. Yeah. Where have all the bloggers gone? Where have all the journalists gone? Where have all the media gone? Where have all the professors gone? A long, long time ago. So, like, how can you have a conversation when all your media and all your universities are busy stabbing you in the back, in the throat, and your children and your communities for a paycheck? The lack of transparency and incompetence. This is a journalist talking about tritium instead of nuclear meltdowns. Has only fueled mistrust. It's just, all 12 years later, still astounding to me that people can write this when the buildings are actually already gone. She almost looks like a normal human, see? That's the confusing part, right? Looks like a normal, everyday South Korean. Could do with a haircut. I mean, who couldn't? But then cut your throat and go home and not lose a second's sleep over it. Several countries requested water samples. Yeah, we lost the planet. Might as well admit it. Might as well admit it. We lost the planet. Everybody's fucking crazy. Excuse it. There you go. I finally lost it. We've been burning at 105, 107 degrees for the last 3 days. You know, this is bad when somebody in Canada is complaining because they had the air conditioner on for 5 days straight. It's ridiculous. The air conditioner's been on for 5 days. The rest of the world is like, shut your pie hole, man. You have no idea. I was out doors yesterday, and as soon as I went out the door, the sweat within probably a minute and a half or something, the sweat, I wasn't doing nothing yet, the sweat was dripping. I was like, wow, how's the poor birds and insects and everything going to hold up against this? The ground is completely dried out. There's no moisture in the ground whatsoever. And now you got a great big hair dryer blown over the entire island. Just need a couple of lightning strikes. Several countries have requested water samples. So they want TEPCO, the criminal, to send them water samples. Can't, like, journalists don't do that. Countries don't do that. They go down and get a boat and go out and take their own water samples. Or they go get a boat, or they go to TEPCO and they say, look, we want water samples, or we're going to tell our country you're lying. When they bully them, right? And you get water samples. You put them in big lead containers, you bring them back to your country. The situation is so dire, even the International Atomic Energy Agency has been unable to get their own sample. Actually, the International Atomic Energy Agency doesn't take samples. They're not a regulator, for starters, and they don't take samples. They're the weirdos that show up everywhere there's nuclear and claim to be, well, they're representing 195 militaries. Adding to the concerns is the detection, and the UN has its own military, right? Jets, ships, tanks, nukes. Adding to the concerns is the detection of radioactivity levels above safety standards in certain fish species, which is a story we covered where they claimed that the fish that were found that were radioactive were fish that escaped the port in front of Fukushima. And they were completely shocked. There was 3 of them about 10 miles away that were found. We covered that story. That was such a strange story. I had to keep that one in my pile, it grows every single day to like, here's another major lie we got to deal with for the rest of our lives. Let me see if we can get through something here. So the story was, the last show, cesium at 180 times in fish at Fukushima. And then they showed you these pictures we'd never seen before. These were what they call an K drainage outlet on the left and B and C on the right drainages. And they drained the site up to 130,000 becquerels per kilogram in the sediment out in front of it. High levels of cesium detected in the rockfish is attributable to water discharge from the K drainage, and that the entrance to the little port has a net there so fish can't get out. So TEPCO hasn't checked it for about 6 years, the fish. But after a heavily contaminated fish was found off Fukushima, apparently it got away from the plant's port. This is an official story now. I've never heard this one before either, and we've been at this 12 years straight. A total of 3 black rockfish that apparently escaped the port have been caught more than 10 kilometers from Fukushima. And the story was original by Fukushima Bureau, but through the Japan Times. Well, I'm sorry, the Machini, which is the same as Japan Times. And so now the official story for fish being found with radiation is that they got out of the port. Well, in the first year it was an extra 865,000 cancers. In North America, there were studies done on 1 million becquerels a square meter fallout of xenon-133. There was 20 million particles of iodine-131 per liter in another study in the US and Canada. There was another story, 220 million atoms per liter, 129, with a 15 million year half-life in Canada. That's 3 different isotopes right there. I've never seen a fallout model of tritium, just the major isotopes. There is no model ever released of tritium, even though there should be, right? Because Canadian plants are incredible prolific disease factories for tritium. Back to that other story. What is the state of the sea and seabed near a Fukushima plant like? It's no wonder neighboring countries are alarmed by the prospect of TEPCO discharging water from the site in the future. But that's to pretend, so what they're trying to do is pretend that never happened. that's the point. That's each of these stories lately, right, since 3.5, 4 weeks ago now, is the tritium version. And I never seen 2.2 grams coming our way, but that's what they done. TEPCO's irrational behavior does not end there. Earlier this month, the Public Power Corporation, through the Foreign Press Center, Japan, accepted applications for on-site reporting by the international news outlet at the plant in one day. This one-day opportunity for July the 21st, it's past 2 days now, seemed like a good chance to inspect the discharge facility. So by framing a narrative that way, they don't have to critique the buildings themselves, right? And a decision was made by... Now, the reason TEPCO is invoked all these times is so you don't blame the nuclear industry. As it is unusual for Japan, a country that values formality, to overly exclude foreign media this way. And the only explanation... Well, they're not allowed to bring their own cameras. The only explanation for a decision that TEPCO must have believed that nothing significant would come from its action. Well, that's the problem. The entire nuclear industry acts that way because there is no repercussions for these for the destruction of the planet. They got all the media on their side and all the universities, and that's worldwide. No exceptions. Japan is well aware, and so I can't wrap my mind around why that's possible. Can you imagine Seth Dorn or Miles O'Brien or any of these big shots that played a big part in this cover story, coming out with a book and telling the true story and saying we were bought off and the whole planet is dying, and I can't live with it. And tell the story, right? And then the planet comes up with solutions, and we might have a future for some species that might survive, and for some of the humans. But right now, all humans' DNA has been changed because of this. It was a pulse event, so all species, not just the humans. And that's the most important facet of the story is we have destroyed the species. Or where the president skips official press conferences, selectively meet reporters, time of South Korea, from his preferred media outlets. This is the same president, when he was a prosecutor running for president, denied that Fukushima happened. And now he's in control of the press and the media and the universities. IAEA Director General Rafael Grossi visited Korea, saw select few media outlets granted interviews. So they're creating a controversy so to get people to focus in on the drama instead of what's really going on, right? The cover up itself. Because they're pretending that didn't happen. And when you look at them, you know they're pricks. As soon as you look at these people, you say, well, yeah, either one of them on the side of the road, you say, well, that's a fucking prick right there. Not maybe, not almost. That's what's going to come to your mind the minute you lay eyes on them in real life. That's a fucking prick right there. That cuts your throat right there in a drop of a hat. This is the Federal Ocean and Fishery Ministers. He's the guy who's talking set up. The rest of them keeps their head down. That's the culture. South Korea is very, very stupid. The government, right, is a very, very stupid government. It's imprisoned North Korea for 120 years with the help of countries like Japan and now United Nations. Japan occupied North Korea for 50 years. Then America dropped the big bombs on them that they didn't need to. I mean, just a week before that, they firebombed Tokyo and incinerated hundreds of thousands of women and children, right? With fire bombs where they couldn't outrun the flames. The bombs they dropped were incendiary bombs. Attacked the civilian population to force Japan to surrender. Which is, in every way you look at it, is a crime against humanity. Beijing restricts Japanese seafood. So you got China, Taiwan, South Korea, and Japan working together to manipulate the Asian people, which is, a huge number of people. And should the world hate Japan, Taiwan, South Korea, and China over the Fukushima deadly tritium mass hoodwink hoax? I would think so. I would hope so. Like, we're not giving up. We're not going away. We're only going to get better every single day. We're not taking no for an answer. The world needs to wake up and fight back against this ridiculous, monstrous industry known as nuclear, this hateful, disgusting, despicable, omnicide industry known as nuclear. It's ran its course. It's time for it to go. It's time for it to be held accountable and for the players to be retroactively held accountable. That's the only outcome that's acceptable. And we can't have a future, period, without that kind of reconciliation. We don't have humanity until we do that. We're exterminating the species. And so they're trying to get you to blame TEPCO or get you to blame Tritium instead of getting you to blame the appropriate criminal. And another sick thing about this industry is you got 14 prefectures are banned by 55 countries for over a decade, where the food is banned, thank goodness. Not that it was really banned in all of them, but they banned it because the country's radioactive, but the Japanese don't care. They continue to grow food in the most prolific prefecture in the middle of a no-go zone. What is a nuclear wasteland has now been renamed a no-go zone. When you see people in tungsten vests, they're not nuclear scientists, they're not engineers, they're not academics, they're not from major nuclear corporations or countries. They're not UN, right? They're not International Atomic Energy Agency. That's going to be the homeless and the destitute and the victims of society. They're growing food alongside of almost every single nuclear power plant on the planet is surrounded by farms. Right? The reason we're seeing the mass species die off is because the Fukushima plume covered the entire planet. And it was a continuous plume and never stopped coming out of there. You had multiple reactors melted down. This model is only based on 16 days of radioactive fallout from France. We launched research expeditions from Vancouver, British Columbia to Alaska. I've done this year after year after year after year after year after Fukushima. And we towed a whole operation all over the bloody planet. And here's what we discovered was that the species were exterminated by continuous radioactive fallout plumes, and not just in the ocean, but actual radioactive airborne plumes covered the entire planet in just 20 to 30 days. So I launched research expeditions, and the species to your left were exterminated. We went back year after year. And when I say we went back year after year, what I'm referring to is we covered the whole coastline for 4 to 5 months at a time in desperation to see if there was an oasis left on the ocean. The species to your left now are officially exterminated. They never came back. They'll never come back. They've been exterminated. That's the Pacific. We're seeing the same thing in the Atlantic for the species, which are not as visible as the Pacific because it was a rainforest, so it had thousands of species in the tidal zones. But they still had lots of species in the Atlantic, and they're visibly noticeable, and they are gone, like the mussels and the sea urchins, the snails, the mollusks, the clams, and birds. We are the biggest migratory bird route on the entire planet. So we done the whole coastline of North in Canada from Vancouver, British Columbia to Alaska year after year in desperation, and the species, that's what it should look like, never came back. It's a total extinction event. And that's due to the perpetual radioactive fallout. Very, very carefully. And carefully stab the whole planet in the back. Beijing restricts Japanese seafood, escalating tensions. So this is meant to perpetrate the lie. That's why we got a poll tonight. Should the world hate Japan, Taiwan? Well, the world will hate Japan, Taiwan, South Korea, and China because of this. Because the truth is going to come out, period. So this is meant to perpetrate the lie that there's 2.2 grams of tritium in the 1,000 tanks, which are empty, by the way. And they're empty because if these tanks were built all in 2013, early 2014, majority of them were bolted together. They're only meant to last a couple of years. But the problem was, if you filled them up with the highly radioactive water, because we know they never had a filtration system, because you can't do that with radiation like this from a nuclear meltdown, because when you put all these particles together into one basket, you cause neutron bombardments and chain reactions. It'll burn holes through the tanks, like you've seen at Hanford, for instance. Turkey said they would be released if addressed reputational damage. Reputational damage. Reputational damage. So the idea is because they got all the media on their side and all the universities, but the idea it won't resonate because it's so full of nonsense, right? So the public relations firm that thought this up wanted to keep it simple, and then if people look up tritium in concern, they would find all of their propaganda only. And that's the world we now live in, right, where they control the data. So normally everybody would get a dictionary or a encyclopedia in their home, and they would look things up on their own. Now they go online, and they'll get whatever version their IP address says they should get. Our job is to be responsible for the health of our people and our marine environment. Opposition Japan's ocean discharge plan is based on facts and reasoning. With no facts, no reasoning. Like, you're pretending that never happened. And you don't think that's wrong? We don't have a single university, not a single journalist, not a single academic of any discipline, except for the nuclearproctologist.org, which is terrifying. There was supposed to be a joke, by the way. China doesn't trust Japan or the IAEA report. Jesus, I suppose not. All anybody's got to do is come out and say, look, this is why we don't trust Japan. That's it. If Greenpeace tweets that out, game over. If some celebrity tweets that out, game over. Some rock star tweets it out, game over. If some government somewhere on the planet tweets it out, game over. If Greenpeace or anybody outside of me or you tweets it out, game over. Anybody that got a big following and sets that loose is game over. Nuclear industry won't be able to claw it back either. The world will just switch on them. And the day is coming when everybody worldwide be encouraged to paint any nuclear scientist yellow. Any nuclear academic, catch them and paint them yellow. We'll pay for the paint. As long urged Chinese authorities to quickly remove import restrictions on Japanese food products based on, so Japan responds, right? And the media is like, no, you got your buildings are melted down, all the inventory was lost, the radioactive fallout has covered the whole planet, we're not touching your food. No. Let's have an argument about something that don't exist anymore. And Japan has to win the argument. They've dumped it all into the ocean, so they need an excuse for why they've been dumping in the ocean. As long urged Chinese authority to quickly remove import restrictions on food from the nuclear wasteland. It only helps if you're crazy, I suppose. Tokyo will continue to make a concerted effort to appeal to the Chinese authorities through every possible opportunity, non-stop, 24 hours a day. China doesn't trust Japan or the International Atomic Energy Agency's report. Like, there's zero possibility China doesn't know what I showed you. It's zero. There's zero possibility any of them don't know what I showed you. It's zero. The European Union announced, coordinated last week, it would lift restrictions on the food imports from Japan. There was no restriction. They asked for a certificate of certification for radiation. Japan was going rubber stamp, rubber stamp, rubber stamp. At least Canada just came out and said, fuck it, and removed all restrictions after 93 days. And so Japan couldn't ship it anywhere worldwide, only Canada, for the first 10 years. The decision was based on scientific evidence presented by the non-regulatory agency. They're a non-regulatory agency. They don't have the authority. The International Atomic Energy Agency is not a regulator, not in a position to judge or approve Japan's soil or anything else, right? And that the Fisher story is 2.2 grams over 30 years is all they're going to release from the multiple nuclear meltdowns, where they've already picked up 30 to 60 million one-ton bags. And that any fish that got out that are radioactive were the ones that got out and were contaminated by the emissions from the K drainage. Not A and C drainage, but K drainage. And weren't the 865,000 extra cancers in 2012 was just some random shit. Yeah, the whole planet got covered in massive radioactive fallout, but nothing got out. Look at the buildings. There's obviously nothing got out. The water has been filtered through the advanced liquid processing system and removed the most radioactive contaminations except tritium. But the ELP system in 2014 didn't work. The ELP system in 2014, the REVA system hadn't worked up to this point either. The bypass operation didn't work. The fence didn't work. The Ice wall, why not build a real wall? Didn't work. Nothing worked. Because, the buildings don't even exist anymore. We're not allowed to talk about that. We're only allowed to say they exist. We're not allowed to prove they don't exist. So you'll never see that picture on the internet outside of my site. Fukushima supermarket sells red salmon raised by land-based farming. Like, you shouldn't be in Fukushima prefecture, period. And this is the northeastern city of Fukushima City, where every building in the city was entitled to be decontaminated. Now, you can't decontaminate a building. And when every building is contaminated, 90,000 of them, then you're supposed to abandon the city, period, permanently. We'll be able to deliver fish that people don't have to think twice about eating. If they're raising that in Fukushima prefecture, then you can't go eating it. It's in a nuclear wasteland. Everything is airborne. It's impossible for the water not to be radioactive. Even if you truck in fresh water from, if there's any place left on the planet, I should say, it still can't be safe because there's nothing safe anymore. But Fukushima is the last spot you want to have something from. Not even a pencil. I wouldn't even take a pencil from Fukushima prefecture in my home. Fukushima plan rejection is mired in anti-science. Anti-science. So if you show that, it's now officially anti-science. You're not going along to get along anymore. Skepticism is one thing, but scaremonger and fearmonger and scare. And it's been a long time since we heard the word scaremongering, isn't it? It's usually reserved for certain scumbags who are the only ones that'll use that terminology. The Lancet, Fukushima water discharge is approved. I'm going to call it wastewater. Like, first off, if you took a bath in the water that's actually in the tanks, if there was anything in the tanks, your skin would come off right away. It wouldn't matter. It wouldn't hurt you because you would have been dead before that happened. But Justin McCurry reports from Tokyo, and we've covered that disgusting parasite endless times over the years. China is playing the Fukushima water standoff for its own gain. The Shimbu, this is a major Japanese propaganda media. China's working in tandem with Taiwan, South Korea, and Japan. And so should the world hate Japan, Taiwan, South Korea, and China over Fukushima deadly tritium as Hoodwink, a hoax? Duh, Dana. We counted the tanks, we only got 750. I don't know if I got a picture right at my fingertips. Because whenever I say that, I can never find it. So I should stop using that word. Really? I'm not going to find it? Oh, well. Lesson learned. Here be the lesson. I'll do something mean to you for a change. Be nice or I'll send this creature to your house. The Green New Deal, Madison, she's an absolute monster. Doesn't even know how to smile on top of... That's the scariest looking smile I ever saw, man. There's a complete disconnect right there. She said, well, I got 10 fingers, 10 toes. I'm probably human, but nobody can prove it. A team from the International Atomic Energy Agency inspects tanks that contain the treated water, which is 2.2 grams of tritium in 1,000 tanks, We counted them, there's only 750, if you include all the small ones. The issue concerns safety and health. I gotta give them credit. They don't disappoint in how evil they are anyway. A cool-headed dialogue based on scientific fact. Yeah, fact. That's something we're not used to in the nuclear industry, is facts. Here's Arnie Gunnarsson. He used to make the racks for the assemblies in the fuel pools for 70 buildings just like Fukushima. I put him up where the fuel pools are too. Now, if he doesn't know the fuel pools are gone, who does, I wonder?
The division I ran built nuclear fuel racks for boiling water reactors exactly like Fukushima.
I like how he sniffs every time he does it. Arnie, the great deceiver. I put Arnie in the actual fuel pool right here. And he's going to try to convince you that he's human. That they put braces under the fuel pool. This is the original.
Unit 4 was damaged twice. It was damaged by all of the earthquakes that occurred, and it was also damaged by a series of explosions over the first week or two of the accident. So the building is structurally weakened. Now, Tokyo Electric's acknowledged that. They went in May and June of last year. This is more than a year ago, and put an enormous number of extra structural supports directly under the fuel pool to keep the bottom of the pool from breaking through.
To keep the bottom of the pool from breaking through. So Arnie claimed they went into the building that don't exist to put braces under the fuel pool that doesn't exist. Really, right? Shouldn't that be a crime? Maybe we'll do a poll tomorrow night. Should it be a crime for Arnie Gunnarsson to claim that TEPCO put braces under the fuel pools? Would that be a good poll? I'm going to write a song, and I'm going to play for everybody. It's going to be called Calm Down, Charlie, You Scammer. I see we got Kevin Blanch's in the house. SpongeBob melted and died from the wasting disease in 2012. That's hilarious, man. That's a great comment. Just SpongeBob. Besides Spider-Man and the Hulk, I forgot to put in SpongeBob. I think I probably got a SpongeBob. I guarantee I got a SpongeBob green screen clipped or somewhere. But let me see if I can find it actually, because who knows with Dana, right? I must have played it before. You know how bad I actually am. Let me see what I got one here. SpongeBob. Yeah. Holy shit. I had a Krusty Krab pizza. Wasn't that a SpongeBob? Yes, Krusty Krab pizza. Try that again here. Let me see, I got another one there. We'd have to settle for just one. I better hang on a second here because we don't know what we're going to get into. Jesus. SpongeBob lives again. Fukushima snow crab cakes. Oh my God. There is no rational case for tightening radiation testing of Japanese seafood exports before the release. There's no rational case. Oh, come on. But there is. They're pretending they're in a building that don't exist. Isn't that a rational case? Maybe I'm not. Maybe being honest is crazy. Maybe I'm crazy. That's it. If you're honest, you're crazy. That makes sense in some sick kind of way that only nuclear can make. Before the water is released. Well, they haven't stopped releasing it because, it melted down in 2012. Should journalists that claim Fukushima didn't melt down lose their degrees and have to work at Reactor 3 for 30 sunsets or something? Any significant disruption in the imports will deliver a blow to the related industries, not just in Japan, but also in China. It'll hurt the interests of China consumers. Yeah. Or kill them, one or the other. Fair call. It'll hurt them, right? Japan could lose its own credibility with the international community. Yeah, if the picture came out. How can the world not be upset about all the media pretending they're in a building that don't exist? How does that actually work? I'm confused. 2,000 peaches stolen from Fukushima. It's such a stupid story, It's a real story for the murderers that were growing food in the nuclear wasteland. They would have made $6,000 or $7,000 off that. It's just murder, Dana. TEPCO invited Korean president to tour Fukushima plant. This is the same guy who said it didn't melt down. Yeah, he's going to head over there right away. TEPCO. Well, come on over here, press. Well, not you and you and you and you, but you and you. You're the president's little lapdogs. You guys can come in. No cameras, but you can come in. NBC was denied access. They were really upset. They said they wanted to see the Tritium for themselves. The deliberate snub of two media companies. This is a stretch to call them media. They shouldn't be allowed to use that word anymore, should they? We've covered the issue most critically in Korea. Raises questions about the transparency. Transparency of Japan. I needed to laugh tonight. I appreciate it. Nothing personal. So Seadrift family is ready to leave if they build a reactor, the small modular reactors from X Energy, is it? What the hell is it? Hang on. I'll find it. Yeah, X Energy. There's so many of them, right? Can't keep track of them. Announced last month they aim to bring all 4 reactors online by 2030. They don't even have a design into the non-regulatory agencies. Which they're supposed to be called the Nuclear Regulatory Agency, but they don't regulate anything. They can just send in 1 million blank pieces of paper, and the Nuclear Regulatory Agency will stamp yep on every one of them. You can't bring 4 reactors online by 2030, right? You got to get a design in. It's going to take 4 or 5 years to go over design. Then you're going to have to modify the designs, reapply them. Then you're going to spend $500 million for the site. You got to spend at least $500 million for the site. You got to spend $500 million for the site. Is that you?
It's me. It's not me again. I mean, what a fantastic subject you're on. Crabs. I like the subject. Keep the crab subject up, yeah?
Yeah. It's Navi. Hi, Navi.
Have you watched the film? I'll put it up on my channel, by the way.
Probably not. I just spent 3 days of dying.
I've put, what's it called, Eisenhower, whatever his name is, on my channel. I've given you a title for it in chat.
Yeah, the industry will get you back.
As well.
Industry will get you back for that.
Oh, no, they will. I don't care.
You should be used to it by now, I hope.
Yeah, well, yeah. I was just hoping that Charlie might have phoned in at the same time. I might have been able to give him a British mouthful, you know what I'm saying? I bet he daren't phone in again.
Yeah, go ahead, I'm sorry.
He'll phone in again.
Yeah. What time is it over where you're to right now?
It's 2:45 in the morning, and it is Monday.
And there's no other nuclear live show on the planet, is there? You're forced to get up this hour at night in order to get into a live show on nuclear. It's a pretty sad world, right?
Too bad, yeah. Pretty sad, like, yeah.
Are you guys gonna hold Geraldine Thomas accountable over there?
I'm thinking it shoots a bit more tame on rules, like, so I've had that film up now for 2 days without it being sent down, so doing pretty well.
Like I was really bad when I was young with my accent, but even then, back then I probably would understand you. Right now, I just can't seem to understand most people from Britain. You're not from Britain, though. You're from Scotland, right?
I'm from England. Yeah, I've got nothing to do with Britain.
You're from. I'm sorry. You're from England.
Yeah, England. Yeah, nothing to do with Britain.
Okay, so you're not Scotland.
No. I've got. You've seen my videos. I go to Scotland quite often.
Yeah.
It's only 50, 60 miles away from me.
That's why I thought that probably, right?
Yeah. Have you seen my videos?
No. You sent it to me. You sent.
You'd be able to see where I come from.
Yeah.
There's me travelling about my area. It's North Yorkshire Moors in England.
Yeah, you like bicycles too, right?
Yeah. I've got an electric bike which I made myself. Yeah.
I seen some of those videos on your site, yeah.
Yeah. Anyway, I'm just wanting to just say hello and everything's cool over here. How's you and everything like that? It sounds like you're having a bit of fun for a change, you know what I'm saying?
Yeah, it's different.
It's about time, isn't it? You know, having a laugh.
Yeah, I suppose you guys gotta get. You got a lot of apologists over there in England too, right? I can't come up with one off the top of my head. So you got a lot of nuclear apologists in England. I just can't come up with one off the top of my head, unfortunately.
Yeah, well, I used to be out with nuclear a lot back in, when I started, it was 1979 when I was 16. I used to do all that stuff back in them days. I used to do all festivals, all that, you know.
Yeah, they have good protests.
With all the ladies as well back in the days. That was a thing that's
When was the last protest you can remember down there for nuclear?
For nuclear?
You were protesting the new reactor. Yeah, you're protesting the new reactor they're building. It's Sizewell, is it?
It's Sizewell C, isn't it? Yeah.
Surrounded by farms.
There's nowhere near it.
Because the Sizewell site has been there with a reactor on it for 40, 50 years, right?
Yeah.
And so,
on West Coast, isn't it?
Yeah. So the new one they're building there is... the old one, folks, has been surrounded by farms for its entire life. The new one, same thing, and it's so far over budget, so far behind schedule, and I mean it's over budget by almost 4 times, is it? Do you know?
Well, that's typical British thing, isn't it? You know,
it's crazy,
destroy
isn't
England, destroy the world, destroy America. You know.
Yeah.
Absolutely detest the British. You do realise there's only 20% of this country actually identifies as being British, you know?
Yeah, I bet, eh?
Identifies as being Welsh, Irish,
yeah,
Scottish.
it's a divided country. I was just reading a story today. There was 2 million of them, absolute poverty. Absolute poverty, right? 70% of the land is owned by 11% of the population. They got a lot. They got a lot of. They got a lot of.
It's all these dual passports as well. Like, do you get over there in Canada where you've got people with Canadian passports and English passports? And
So you guys, do you guys
passports and
recognize
there,
Charles? Do you guys recognize Prince Charles or King Charles?
King Jimmy Savile, the pedo, is nothing to do with me.
So you guys don't have. Yeah, does King Charles have anything to do with you guys?
We absolutely detest him. He's been raping our children for the last God knows how many years, you know?
Yeah, that whole family is just a legacy.
English people have nothing to do with the monarchy or the royal family.
Well, Canada do. We got our money. We got
children for the last 50, 70 years, you know?
Yeah, they done the same thing here to Canada.
Disgusting.
Canada's basically owned by Britain, right?
Exactly. Well, yeah, exactly. Britain's taking virtually
the politicians in Canada.
America, you know?
The politicians in Canada and the police and government agencies swear allegiance to the British royal family first and Canadian second.
Yeah. Do you realise what the British are? The British are a political ideology, the idea which came up about 250 years ago in 1680 and then came to power in 1707. And then they've been an entity ever since, an empire ever since. Remember the Soviet Empire?
Yeah.
That was dissolved in 20, 30 years. The English Empire, the British Empire has been here since 1707. There's still been raping and pillaging us and turning us, torturing us and turning us into prisoners and sending us off to Australian places, you know?
Yeah, no, I'm familiar with it, yeah.
Yeah.
I'm very familiar with that. We have the Queen's face on our money still, right?
The British are the people who introduced nuclear to the planet.
That's right, yeah. Cauldron Hall, you know? Yeah. Well, I mean, you know, it was Enrico Fermi built the first one, but Cauldron Hall was the first one to be up and running.
Which hall was that? I couldn't quite get that.
Was it Cauldron Hall?
Cauldron? How do you spell that?
Caldwal or Cauldron? I can't remember. That's what I was asking you. What was the name of that? Because the Queen was there for the inauguration, right? Cauldron
Hall, it was a Cauldron Hall in Norwich. I've never heard of it.
I don't know for sure. Okay, my friend, anything else you want to throw out there?
No, I just wanted to say, you know, have a good evening and that. That's what I usually do.
Good stuff.
Thanks for your show and everything.
Alrighty.
Thanks a lot. Bye.
Okay, I that was Nobby. You know, it was Nobby Noble, I think, in the comment section. And does nuclear slow down the scale up of wind and solar? France and Germany can't agree. Well, like, France is completely dishonest in every facet of nuclear. And 10 administrations have denied the French Polynesians in Niger reparation for the crimes committed against them with nuclear. Every single person in the French Polynesian island was incredibly radioactive, and their water and land was permanently, hideously, monstrously destroyed. What Christians should know about nuclear power, what Christians, and the Andrew Spencer, the guy who wrote the story, he got his name on it. I don't know if he wrote it, but his name is on the story. Because the nuclear industry usually likes to write the story and get people like Andrew there to build up an audience with cat videos and stuff like that, and then the nuclear industry will come in and stick them with some first-class propaganda. We need power when the wind isn't blowing, the sun isn't shining, and nuclear power can help. So this argument, we've covered this nonstop for the last 12 years straight. We hear this constantly, and that's why you won't see renewables won't get storage. There is some now showing up, right? But generally, renewables, they denied renewables. Canada closed 750 wind solar farms last year. The $4.5 billion allocated to the renewable industry for storage was taken and given to Bruce Nuclear Power in Ontario. and they're going to build storage with it. Because if the 750 renewable sites of wind and solar had got storage, that would have been all over for nuclear, right? Canada doesn't really exist. It's the nuclear industry runs Canada since the 50s. The media, the governments, the universities included. Canada's completely corrupted. There is no Canada. We need power. I see Justin Trudeau got chased out of a meet and greet there a couple of days ago in Canada, where there was a whole bunch of activists showed up and chased him back to his vehicles. Would get the F out of here, you piece of shit, over and over and over. And he did. Either fossil fuel, nuclear, or hydropower. So they refused to mention geothermal. So they say the only solution, and this was disgusting because he's appealing to the so-called Christians, right? And the whole paragraphs of just revolting propaganda. And then you get, he said, by far my highest source of radioactive exposures has been from the sun. From the sun and flying on commercial airlines. You know you're talking to an incredible lowlife when you see that kind of stuff, and you see it all the time. Hydropower requires disrupting the ecosystem, which can prevent fish from spawning. Nuclear destroys the entire ecosystem, period. The radioactive emissions and the heat generated from cooling the 1 million gallons a minute, the 4,500 tons a minute of water. UN's approval rating inches up to 33%, which was better than saying the disapproval rating was 58%. So, no, it's inching up to 33% now, so that's pretty good. Yeah, but his disapproval rating was 58%, almost double his approval rating. It doesn't matter because he's a prosecutor, and so he doesn't care. The truth doesn't matter. He gave a speech on the nuclear-powered ballistic nuclear missile submarine, the USS Kentucky, USS. How disgusting that the nuclear industry does stuff like that, where they name the ships after good people and cities. Oppenheimer in the business of nuclear power. Oppenheimer in the business of nuclear power. Oppenheimer in the business of nuclear power. Well, Oppenheimer, Groves, and Lawrence, they're basically commissioned to get a chain reaction and take it to the next level if it could be done. And then Einstein was part of that equation, right? E equals mc squared. And Einstein said if he had known what was going to take place, he never would have mentioned E equal mc squared. Comes at a time when the world is once again zoomed in to the nuclear issue. These are artificially inflated issues where they're not real issues, right? As the world gripped with the dark, they ignore the real issues and come up with like tritium. As the world gripped with the dark prospect of global warming, which is caused by radioactive fallout, 80 years of it, pulsing energy every second, and never goes away. The more you add, the hotter the planet gets, and you never stop adding it because 1,000 fuel pools worldwide are hemorrhaging the atoms into the environment because the fuel from the reactors, when you take it out, have no containment and are still splitting atoms, the same amount of atoms they would use to boil 1 million homes, water for 1 million homes, are now released into the environment. The atoms are pulsing energy at the speed of light every second. And we're talking about the power to radiate rocks and steel and trees and bushes with these neutrons that are being released. And so you're artificially, which is all is anyway, enhancing this anthropogenic man-made death machine. It's really, they don't call it the atomic plague for nothing. It remains conflicted about nuclear power. But without nuclear power, none of it could exist on top of that. Many countries wary of nuclear power, especially when green activists are forcefully advocating a turn away from it. So let's say I'm one of those people. So how influential am I when I have 32 people on my show after 12 years? I'm not, right? And so there's not very many, if any, that are talking about the fuel emissions from the fuel pools, for starters. Many countries and all fuel nuclear power plants are surrounded by farms to catch some of those big emissions and send it out to your supermarkets. Many countries wary of nuclear power, especially when green activists are forcefully advocating a turn away. Germany's made up its mind to quit nuclear power after Japan caused a leakage of radiation. And so when you hear the word leakage, you should be frightened, because these are not leakages, these are a complete loss of the entire inventories. We're talking about decades of reactor cores at the top of the buildings, let alone the reactor core. And reactor 4, by the way, had half a reactor core was in the reactor. They never take the whole core out of the reactor unless they're doing a 3 or 4 year refurbishment, and they weren't. Nuclear power proponents say Germany will have to go back to nuclear eventually if it wants to phase out fossil fuel. Wind and solar will not fully cover demand. Geothermal will, though. It's just the relentless propaganda, the relentless, unbelievable propaganda that you see coming from this. Rainer Kloot, who've recovered quite a bit, head of a pro-nuclear non-profit, Nuclear, which is Germany. He's a perpetual lawyer on top of that. As of 2022, 411 reactors were operating in 33 countries. 411 disease factories. So a Malaysian icon that is part of everything. The country put him on a massive pedestal. So when we think of a Malaysian icon, we usually think of prime ministers, professional squash players, maybe even fashion designers, instead of somebody that's a good person for the country and a representative of what a good person is. They put corporate figureheads up there. But did you know, nestled between these familiar corporation faces, on an installation known as the Bird of Malaysia, erected at the Kuala Lumpur International Airport, celebrating our national heroes, is our Catholic brother in Christ, Professor Dr. Christopher Nig Kwang Hong. He was honored in 2018 with the first ever scientist of a developing country to receive a prestigious Marie Curie Award. And if that's not enough, wow, Dr. Nig is also certified by the American United States Board of Medical Physics, consult with the International Atomic Energy Agency. Is a member of the elite study team that worked on the health consequences of Fukushima Daiichi nuclear power plant disaster. In other words, he's a piece of shit. He's a disgusting human scumbag. The Washington Post, more transparency is needed on the impact of tritium. You heard me. And so you got nobody out there willing to be honest. They certainly all got no issues cutting your throat, though, but none of them are willing to say, look, it's uranium, plutonium, and everything else. Tritium is the last thing we're worried about. It's been hemorrhaging for 12 years. No. Washington Post, democracy dies in the darkness. In other words, democracy is dead. And then use tritium. Show you these tanks. And And this is the common spent fuel pool right there. Right, that little building right there and that building right there, which were all redacted because that's reactor 4 right there. And the tsunami ran right through this and emptied it. And look at these small tanks. That's 100 right here, another 100 over right there. So they got a number of little spots like this. That's where they got their 1,000 tanks to. The tanks are empty, by the way. And if you step over the hoses connecting these tanks, you'll die right away. But when we counted all the tanks, and the best picture they got, we only got 750 tanks. They've never shown in the last 10 years. Well, 10 years ago, they said they had 1,000 tanks, right? Absolutely cooked. Hang on. So 2013, excuse me, that snipped it on me. 2013, they had 1,000 tanks. 2023, guess how many tanks they got? Oh, don't bother, I'll tell you. They had 1,000 tanks. Tritium will bind to carbon and bioaccumulate in the food chain rather than dissipate. It's called organic tritium, and it'll bind to your blood cells, it'll bind to your white blood cells, it'll bind to your DNA and your chromosomes, and it becomes organic, and then it's there for 120 years. There's so much propaganda there, you can barely keep up with it, eh? Cindy Falker is a radiation health specialist. Would gladly cut your throat. And so you had 4 comments. First one is all like tritium. It's an essential component of fusion weapons. The next one says, well, tritium, you got to keep this narrative, right? Has a relatively short half-life measured in days, not years. It's actually 120 years. Unlike plutonium, cesium, cobalt. Well, why would you mention the word cobalt? Why wouldn't you mention americium, neptunium, and strontium, and the rest of the nasty ones? And other radioactive waste associated with atomic weapons. Water is exchanged in our body with a half-life of 10 days or so. No, it's organically bound to your cells because your body is made up of cells. So once it goes in your body, that's it. It's not coming back out. If tritium becomes incorporated into our body as part of the protein or other molecules, it remains in the body much longer. As far as Fukushima is concerned, we're considering that 1 liter of seawater contains 60 million tritium atoms on average. Well, actually, let's go back a couple of months. Can we do that? Let's go back to, I actually got the International Atomic Energy Agency's reports from a couple of months ago, and it was called ALPS Nuclear Water Rules. So let's go down that road, why don't we? Because it's quite telling, really. Now, originally they said they got no samples, right? Originally they say they got no samples, but bear with me, because you probably have never seen this. Let's make sure I got the right starter. Yeah, that's it right there. Let's go to the big screen, because nobody's ever seen this before, I don't think. Where's Dana's coming from? Ah, there we go. New report details International Atomic Energy's independent checks of the treated water discharge from Fukushima. Now, tonight we're using a new gadget for, let me fix that, for for SDI to HDMI, because normally, like my camera's a HDMI or a SDI, and I was using the Blackmagic monitor as a reducer to go from SDI to HDMI, and because that's worth $1,200 or something, and I need it for my, because it's a recorder too, right? So it's really a powerful weapon for what I'm doing. So this morning I had to dismantle it and put in the new SDI to HDMI that showed up finally. What a disaster that was, trying to get that to work. We got it working, so that's, I'm liking it. Everything looks great. Okay. And now that's attached to the gimbal for the beat camera. And I can record in that in pro resolution, all different resolutions. And it's all just touch screen. And so tomorrow I should be out on the ocean with that. Hopefully that works out. And it's 4K. So the idea, if everything works tomorrow, we'll shoot the seabirds that are survived, the survivals, because we've had 3 days of a massive heat wave here, and we only have a 4% survival rate of the baby seabirds. And so it'll be interesting tomorrow to find out how many survived, if everything works the way it's supposed to. Like that's ever going to happen. No report details International Atomic Energy Agency independent checks of treated water discharge. Independent checks. Okay, so the International Task Force established review of the safety of Japan's plan to discharge the Alps, which I showed you earlier, didn't work all the way into 2014, so therefore it didn't work. Released its third report, and that's the report here. Safety-related aspects of handling Alps treated water, but this was released, what's the date on this? December the 29th, 2022. That report came out. It's backed up by United States Nuclear Regulatory Department of State, CNSC, the Australian government, New Zealand government. The document was produced with financial assistance of the organizations shown here, all these government agencies, New Zealand, Australia, Department of the U.S. Consistent with the relevant International Atomic Energy Agency standards, TEPCO is required to determine the characteristics and activity of the ALPS. TEPCO is required, not the International Atomic Energy Agency. To establish and implement monitoring programs to ensure the public exposure due to the discharges is adequately assessed. Again, that's kind of schizophrenic because the building's melted down, right? So to suggest that they didn't is dishonest. And I want you to think about, when I get through this, is that 50 becquerels a kilogram is irreversible damage for children, heart damage. The chosen operational perimeters for the discharge, including annual limit of 22 trillion becquerels, not millisieverts, microsieverts, but in actual becquerels, physical atoms, concentrations of 1,500 becquerels. That's 1,500 pulses a second per liter. Now they're saying there's only tritium, right? But TEPCO has the sole responsibility for source monitoring at the Fukushima Daiichi nuclear power plant. So TEPCO has the sole responsibility. The International Atomic Energy Agency doesn't do it. But that's not what it said originally in the story, was it? All environmental monitoring related to the nuclear accident at Fukushima Daiichi nuclear power plants is conducted according to the Comprehensive Radiation Monitoring Plan. TEPCO and other relevant Japanese authorities have that responsibility under the Comprehensive Radiation Monitoring Plan, which is known as the CRMP. The comprehensive radiological characterization of samples of the Alps treated water is being conducted, but is not expected any significant detectable amounts of the nucleoids will be present in the samples analyzed without extrapolating or or explaining why they would suggest something like that at a nuclear meltdown. The International Atomic Energy Agency considers that it is necessary to promote confidence in TEPCO's source monitoring. And we're just about to show you that, right? 2 more clicks. So common radionuclides like cobalt, strontium, rubidium, silver, iodine, cesium, tritium, carbon, and technetium-99 in the tanks from which samples will be collected and have been published by the criminals themselves, which is TEPCO. So you don't blame the nuclear industry or the International Atomic Energy Agencies. And well, now the scary part of this story was that when you start looking at what was considered acceptable limits, becquerels a liter. And theirs was their half-lives in the center one. This is per liter. And that was the radionuclides over there. So iodine-129, with a 16 million year half-life, the discharge limit was 9 becquerels a liter. So why would you say something like that anyway? Bear with me. Why would you suggest something like that when in 2012 you had 220 million atoms per liter of iodine-129 in the rain after Fukushima? So why suggest now the limit is 9 becquerels a kilogram when the plumes covered the entire planet at 220 million atoms per liter? Because there's nobody to challenge them, only 2 or 3 people at best, right? Discharge limits, becquerels per liter, 60,000 for tritium-3H with a 12-year half-life. There's 10 half-lives, which is still not 100%. Now, when they say a half-life, 50% of it will be reduced to another atom after, say, 12 years. That's not true 100%. That's just a guesstimate, because you don't have 100 years to look back and quantify that type of assertion, right? 6,000 and 1,000 technetium-99. Technetium-99 with a 210,000 year half-life. And so they like to claim that with the longer the half-life, the less radioactive it is. But that's true in nature, not once it's gone through a chain reaction, has become anthropogenic man-made radionuclides. But then you got, let me go backwards. So you also got to consider all the iodines, the cesiums, the uraniums. Look at the numbers on the uraniums, by the way. And neptunium-237 at 2,144,000 year half-life at 20 atoms per liter, or 9 atoms per liter. Plutonium-238. Like, to have these tiny numbers for any of the plutoniums or the americiums, this is absurdness, by the way. And the, let me keep going here. $70,000. I can't remember which one that is. Sorry. Plutonium, they're saying at 4 becquerels a liter. Plutonium 240. Curium isotopes, which by the way is the biggest byproduct of the radiated fuel rod, not tritium, not iodines, not cesium, but curium isotopes. You need lead shielding 20 times thicker than you do for the plutonium isotopes. When you compare them, the only thing they're leaving out of the equation, and this is the most important part, is that the buildings were completely destroyed, right? This is not real. That's what it actually looks like. So why would you believe anything coming out of their mouth when they've already done that? How can you, right? And so, but what we're showing over all these years is this prolific, monolithic effort to manipulate the entire population of the planet. And it seems to work so far, but it can't work forever, because the only way it works is they got to keep doing it all day, every day. The minute they stop, reality will set in, see? South Korea holds a rally against the discharge of Fukushima wastewater. So they got people protesting what might happen, not what has happened and continues to happen. It's a very, very dangerous precedent. I'd like to ask the question to the Japanese government: why is it seeking to release the contaminated water in the ocean if it's safe, as Japan claims? Why is it seeking to dump it through a 1 kilometer tunnel after dilution if the water is safe enough to drink? Not only that, it's really safe and edible water. Japan can just use it inside its territory for agricultural, which is what they're doing with the bags, by the way. The 30 million one-ton bags of radiation, industrial and drinking purposes. Yeah, the whole country is radioactive. They just want to spread the disease factory as far and wide as they can. But the buildings are actually destroyed. It's been hemorrhaging. There is nothing in the tanks. The tanks is the final gambit in the game of chess that they're playing with Earth. And they're hoping that you're going to blame the die-offs of all the species on climate change instead of them, which is who you should be blaming. They're the final straw, right? Japan committed in communicating safety aspects in discharging Fukushima treated water. Japan is committed. Yeah, no, it's like a banana and a potato chip, walking in the sunshine, and getting on an airplane. Does deep geothermal energy, a game changer? So you just drill down into the earth, and you got permanent energy, like boiling water, the same as nuclear, except you don't have to use commodities. You can leave it there for 100 years, and it only needs a couple of, depending on how big it is, it needs very, very few people. There's nothing to break, and you just got to grease a few shafts and stuff like that. Unlike solar and wind energy, which are dependent on weather conditions, even geothermal is beating the shit of. So geothermal should be backed up with wind and solar, so you can have a huge amount of energy in prime time, right? Potsdam geothermal project produces double the expected output. You get twice as much electricity as they're expecting. So their output will be enough to a demand of around 5,000 houses. It's about $5 million a megawatt. So dirt cheap. And it's permanent. There's nothing toxic. You don't have to have scumbag International Atomic Energy Agency coming into your country and making it dirty. The system will provide us with more than twice the output than we expected at the beginning of the project. Geothermal energy to heat stroke on Trent $60 million good yard scheme. So it'll do all the heating and cooling for these big buildings. It was 180 apartments or something. Cafes and bars being built at the former industrial site, geothermal. And so that's a huge saving, right? Because you know how much energy is now. Himalaya's thermal energy will generate electricity. Possibility of generating 10,000 or 10 gigawatts, 10 large nuclear power plants of electricity from geothermal energy were estimated 15 years ago. And this is 123 megawatts in Kenya, which is 129,000 people. 7 megawatts in Ethiopia. 5 megawatts in Papua New Guinea. Today, 20 countries of the world, including America, with 3.7 gigawatts, 3,676 megawatts, are producing electricity from geothermal energy, which is only 1% of the energy on the entire planet, but is capable of powering the entire planet. The power plant you don't expect. In Tuscany, in particular, Lardardrello, Enel Green Power operates the oldest, at the same time, the most innovative geothermal complex in the world. It's 34 geothermal power plants, 37 generation units, distributing among the provinces 6 billion kilowatt hours, 6 terawatt hours are produced each year. Not only does this amount meet more than 33% of the region's electricity need, it provides heating to 13,000 users, including nearly 30 hectares of greenhouses and companies in agricultural businesses, floriculture, and handcraft sectors. Wow. 60,000 visitors a year come there to see it. Oregon Tech was awarded $18 million for geothermal projects. $18 million, because their university for 60 years has ran on geothermal. And they could now look forward to another 75 years of geothermal running the university. And the student dorms and the schools and the gyms and everything else, and the laboratories. Heat pumps have improved over the last several years, but it might not be the best option for homes in areas that consistently reach below 20 degrees Celsius, but the technology actually has changed, right? Conventional air intake heat pumps work best in milder climates like the coastal British Columbia, Manitoba, and Canada. Hydro recommended rather not using them below 10 degrees Celsius. As it gets colder, they lose their ability to efficiently heat the house. A backup heating option like a furnace, fireplace, or baseboard heater is advisable for extra cold days below minus 30 degrees. So if you're going to get below minus 30, you might need backup. So if you're building a home, then a heat pump is the only way, the smart option, right? That's an incredible statement. Air source heat pumps extract heat from the air outside to heat the homes, or extracted from inside and push the heat out to cool the homes. Ground source heat pumps draw heat from a heating loop installed deep below the ground and push it back out into the outside air when switched to cooling mode. Ground source geothermal heat pumps work even when above ground temperatures dip below minus 30 degrees Celsius, because the heat sources they draw from stay above freezing all year round. In Canada, just like in Sweden. Cooling efficiencies also decrease the hotter it gets outside, but heat pumps keep home habitable even in extreme heats. When temperatures in Seattle, USA, reach 42 degrees Celsius during the heat dome, air source heat pumps installed in Seattle homes can keep the indoor temperatures below 75 degrees Fahrenheit temperatures. So a 35 degree drop in your indoor temperature. Balfour Beatty to build a $240 million, which is a company, to build a $240 million Virginia student housing unit. Using geothermal heating, air conditioning, and additionally fossil fuel dependent systems in the Lemon and Hardy halls will be replaced with geothermal energy. So complete geothermal, they got around 1,200 beds or something for students, 1,200. 935 students in one campus and 270 in another. A 50,000 square foot dining space. So you're going to heat everything. It's brilliant, right? It's permanent. India has 179 gigawatt renewable energy capacity installed in the country. That's equal to 176 large nuclear power plants, except it's renewables. And geothermal is one of them, not the biggest, but it's one of them. How concentrated, and this is the last one, I think. No, there's still 2, 3. How are we doing on time here? Let's buzz through the rest of them. So this is a great story if you want to understand concentrated solar power. This one is where they use a tower, and all of them can shine on the tower and superheat the water. But there's many of these different systems to superheat water. And you go from 293 degrees Celsius to 400 degrees Celsius. You can track the sun and get 600 degrees Celsius. There's all kinds of wonderful ways to do this. Fantastic stuff. And you get up to 1,000 degree, and you can, if you use nickel, you can speed up the reaction at lower temperatures. And talking about water cooling the windows for hot solar receivers at 1,500 degrees Celsius. It's not hard to get the kinks out of this. Australia renewable investments are breaking records, but the pro-nuclear in Australia has gone livid trying to get nuclear there before renewables take over. And wind and solar outperformed coal in the United States this year. Or last year, was it? The first half of the year, wind and solar generated more power than coal in the United States for the first time ever. But none of it's geothermal. Out-generated coal in 2022, a first for an entire year. With nuclear in the equation is carbon-free, right? So they put slip nuclear in there, dirty, disgusting nuclear in there. And they had advertisement on Yahoo. Could dimming the sun save the climate? No. The reason it's hot is because of 80 years of emissions from nuclear. Disgusting Yahoo, man. 18 anti-nuclear protesters sentenced to 7 years in jail in India. And they're calling it a frame-up. And then demonize the anti-nuclear movement at the same time. And probably the most disgusting story we're going to see, besides Japan and nuclear, is Grace Skank is a real-life Barbenheimer, and here's why. Miss America 2023. They actually done an interview with this crazy lunatic. She's an engineering student, the first year. She won Miss America. The nuclear industry probably done that on purpose because there was much, much prettier girls in that contest than her. She won it, and they've been using her to pump nuclear nonstop ever since. She's not your typical New York City diva. She's a nuclear scumbag student, And the 20-year-old is a real-life version of Barbie and Oppenheimer. They desperately want to promote her as the poster child. And we've seen some pretty extreme, because, it's easier to look at her than Bill Gates or Elon Musk, right, which are the other two poster childs. Another disgusting story, it's from the Japan Times. You have to be worried sick about what their motives are, right? Trinity nuclear test fallout reached 46 states, Canada, and Mexico. And that was used just to downplay it. And the guy who done the study, we know him well over the years. Plutonium implosion device, 100-foot tower at the Trinity. And July 45, Robert Oppenheimer and the other researchers' Manhattan Project prepared to test their brand new atomic bomb. Hang on here. Just me searching. Should turn the audio off. My apologies. I'll turn it off in a second. It was July the 16th. We missed the anniversary. Look at that. Ow. July the 16th. Was the first nuclear detonation, 1945, on July the 16th. It was the Trinity nuclear test. But anyway, there's another propaganda story. Let me see. Trinity Fallout, Felipe says, accounted for 87% of the total disposition found across New Mexico. Like, it's ludicrous to suggest something like that when you look at, they set off 36,000 Hiroshima-sized nuclear weapons worldwide in what they're so-called nuclear testing. Militarism must die if people are going to live. Yeah, that's the last story right there. The military... I'm offline? How the fuck did I get offline? I'm still probably online on your side though, but let me see if I come back online here. That's just my external operating system for controlling YouTube, so it's not going to interfere with the live show, which is now over anyway, but let me see what I got going on here. There we go, we're back. Okay, well, I guess that's it. Let's do a poll. Let's close the poll down, I suppose. We'll call it a night. Let me find some outro music. We'll bring up the poll. There we go. Close the poll down. We got 47 votes. Should the world hate Japan, Taiwan, South Korea, and China for hoodwinking and hoaxing the whole planet by claiming it's only tritium? Yeah, they should. They should despise them forever and ever and ever. We got 39 votes. We'll hang on till we got 40, I suppose, and then we'll call that a night. Gonna end the poll right here. Thank you, everybody. Have a great night. Thanks, Dana Nasana. Good night, everybody. All right. Made it through another show. That was a tough show tonight. I had a lot of stuff going on there. We made it. That's all that matters, right? We'll see everybody. And I'm just going to end the show because we're past 2 hours. We like to do, but that's how it goes on a typical Sunday anyway. Don't forget to give us a thumbs up. We got 40 thumbs up, so we're good to go. We'll see everybody tomorrow. I might be live streaming tomorrow from the ocean if everything goes appropriate. Keep your eye out for that. And we might be shooting in 4K tomorrow, and we'll be posting that up on the site. That'll be incredible footage, but sad story, unfortunately. Have a great night, a great day tomorrow. Hope everybody had a great weekend. We'll see everybody tomorrow night. And if you make it this far, don't forget, give us a thumbs up. Costs us very little and might actually work.